Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson. Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. So if you, again, have been following us for any time, listening, watching, you know that this season we are really talking about what happens if DEI goes away. And as I've been having these conversations and talking to other consultants and leaders in corporations, in nonprofits, and other spaces, we all realize the work will continue to happen, right? Work needs to continue to happen in order for us to have more inclusive workplaces, for us to have more psychologically safe workplaces, for us to have environments where everyone can thrive. But one of the challenges that we often run into, especially if we're working with leaders who are just not quite sure what to do, is they don't know how to move past the discomfort. Right? They don't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And so today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that whole area of like, how do you start to push past that discomfort? And so my guest today is Nadia Nagamootoo, who is a consultant in this space, who works with leaders, works with organizations to really help them get past that discomfort. So Nadia, welcome to this episode. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here and to be talking to you. Thank you so much for having me, Sacha.
Absolutely. So for folks who may not know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Indeed. So I am, you can probably tell from my accent, I am based in the UK, so I'm south of the London Dial. And I'm a chartered psychologist by profession. So I'm a business or occupational, organizational psychologist. It's called different things in different parts of the world. I'm also an accredited coach. I have an MBA from a business school here called Henley Business School in the UK. I have my own company, which I set up almost 10 years ago, called Avenir, and we are a diversity, equity and inclusion consultancy working with corporates, organizations to support with their DEI strategy and inclusive leadership development. And I have a podcast show myself called Why Care, which is in its 5th season. And I've just written a book, which is very aptly named, given the basis of our conversation, Beyond Discomfort, Why Inclusive Leadership is So Hard and What You Can Do About It.
I love it. You're doing all the things. I love it.
I'm having fun.
Going after my own art. Do all the things. So let's just dive right into it. This work is hard if you are trained in it, even harder if you aren't, if you are a leader, a people leader, a manager of people or projects, and you're dealing with people. A lot of people, I keep saying people, a lot of folks are just uncomfortable, right? They don't want to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. They may not even have all of the information. How do you help them kind of take that first step? Like, what is something that people can do to take that first step?
Yeah. So just as diversity, equity and inclusion practitioners, we know that it has to start with us. Yeah, we can't rock up and start having conversations around diversity, equity and inclusion unless we've done the hard, deep work ourselves. Who we are, where our privilege is. Some people don't like that term. That's fine. Unearned advantages are, and we all have them. It's nothing to be ashamed about. But we have done the work and continue to do the work, because it isn't just once and done. And we practice as much as we can to self-reflect, to deeply understand our thoughts and how our inner voice might filter in some bias to our day-to-day lives, whether it's when we're entering a bus and see someone sitting and decide, oh, actually, I don't want to sit next to that person, and to start questioning what's going on there. Why did I decide not to do that? And it's a practice, and we work very hard to continue that practice, because those biases creep in at any moment. Now, the thing is, with managers, leaders in organizations, let's face it, I mean, they're under-resourced, they're under so much pressure, they're working 24/7 as it is, with significant cuts in the marketplace, the economy's not great. It's just hard to spend that dedicated time. Because it takes practice. And when I mean a practice, I'm talking about, like, the type of practice like in martial arts, where they practice that
consistent.
It's part of who they are. It's so that mastery of a practice, which takes thousands and thousands of hours. That's what the deep work that needs to be done in order for us to really recognize the inner voice and put a halt to it and kind of go, hang on a second, what happened there? What was I thinking there, and why do I think that? Where does that belief come from, and where might I have learned that? All of those questions. As a manager, when you're focusing so much on the deliverables and trying to manage this usually hybrid now and probably globally dispersed team, it is really asking a lot for them to dedicate that time, those hours, to practice something like deep self-reflection, deep self-awareness. And of course, to then reach out to those people in their team or in their workplace who have different diversity characteristics to them, which is all part of being an inclusive leader, to reach out to people you don't necessarily identify with from a diversity perspective and understand their experiences. Like, who has the time for that?
Right. You know what? It's interesting, though. I find that if you do take the time, especially earlier in your career, to do that deep work, it frees you so much later on down the line, right? When I work with clients, especially in the coaching space, we do, like, let's talk about your values and your identities and what's important to you and what shaped how you see the world. Because we often think, oh, because we're in the same place, everybody's having the same experience, which isn't necessarily the case.
Right.
And so it's, how did you get to this point? What were some of the challenges that you had to get to this point? And really start to unpack our own individual journeys before you can then start to think about, oh, wow, I have 10 people on my team, each with an individual journey. I cannot manage them all the same because they're coming from different places and spaces. And so it really takes that early, who am I? What type of leader do I want to be? How do I want to show up in this world? How do I want to support? How can I support? Because the other thing that a lot of leaders don't necessarily realize or understand is, you may want to support in a certain way, but that might not be your strength. Because you haven't done that. You haven't gotten that support yourself. That was a realization that I had, right? Like, I can't give to my team. I can't support my team because I'm not getting the support. I'm getting beaten up, right? And so I can't give you what I don't have. And so it's a lot of those aha moments of, what is it that I need? How can I best support others? What kind of support do I need in order to do that? And then as you were saying, how our experiences shape how we see the world and how we interact with other people.
And it's interesting you just raised that, a really interesting point there. We've just done some research at Avenir, and we interviewed different leaders around that discomfort that they experience. And some of the leaders themselves identified with minority or marginalized groups. And it was really interesting, the distinction. There were on top of the other more common areas of discomfort, like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I misstep? What if what if I have to challenge upwards and it's risky for me and it damages my career because I've said something and I've challenged exclusion and, you know, all of those things. Those people from minority or marginalized backgrounds had all of that, but they also had the additional discomfort of their own lived experience of being in the minority. And so they had leadership power, hierarchical power, but they still had to navigate the system, and the discomfort that they're having to almost call out or name some exclusionary, something exclusionary about the culture, but it has affected them too. So there's a different type of allyship. So those people who say, for example, were in more majority, identified with more majority characteristics, they were able to, once they were able to overcome the discomfort, they didn't have that additional kind of, how is this going to look? Because I'm
representing.
Exactly, because I'm trying to get the nuance behind it, and you've named it there. It's that I'm representing people of my background at the same time as trying to create a more inclusive culture in my organization, which I have a responsibility for because I'm a leader.
Right.
It gets much more complex, and there's more discomfort there with leaders from minority groups feeling like it's possibly a little bit more riskier for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and when I worked in corporate, you know, I would often say, you know, I'm advocating for others, but in that I'm advocating for myself.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yes, I'm speaking on behalf of other marginalized groups because that's the job that I have, is to focus on them.
Yeah.
But I too am part of that group, right?
Exactly.
I too am experiencing the very things that we're trying to dismantle or bring light to. And so there is an additional risk to that, because what often happens is it gets flipped as, oh, well, no, this is a personal thing that you're focused on. And it's like, yes, and it's not, right?
Exactly.
I am a part of this group. I can't disassociate myself from that group because of my experiences. And the fact that someone is asking me to disassociate myself from that says that you don't necessarily see me.
Yeah, exactly. So so anyway, we've sort of gone down a very specific type of discomfort there. But, you know, in my book, I talk about other forms of discomfort, which is, you know, for example, leaders feeling like, hang on a second, you're telling me I need to advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but all the stuff I see happening in the organization around diversity, equity, and inclusion has nothing to do with me. It doesn't support people like me. There's no initiative or program, you know, to help people like me. And in fact, I now feel like I don't have a voice when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And of course, this is very much linked to the backlash that we have been experiencing and you've been talking about on your show already this season. You know, this pushback partly comes from, and of course, the people who are generally feeling that way have typically got more power in the organization. And what I mean by that is the system has typically favored certain types of people. Most organizations, white, male, cis, hetero, and it's those people who are feeling ostracized. And this is the danger, and this is why, from a DEI backlash perspective, of course, when you're trying to change any form of change, when you're trying to push up against a system where there's power, and there's always power in a system, the power will push back.
Yeah.
Because the system doesn't want to change. The system does not want to change. We don't like that as humans. And it really feels uncomfortable to see this kind of momentum growing and to go, well, what about me? Hang on a second. And then they suddenly realize, well, hang on, we've got power here because we're in the majority still. So we can push back against this. We can say no. And
We
so
can change laws, we can change policy, we can change.
to make sure this doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's fascinating if you look at kind of how we've gone about trying to create change. And I'm all for saying, look, maybe we could have done this better. Maybe this. The thing is with diversity, and this is the discomfort again. It is so emotional. It is so deeply.
Yeah. It's personal.
There's trauma there,
Mm-hmm.
ancestral trauma, as well as so dating back centuries trauma, as well as current day trauma that we all live, and it's there and it's present in our system. And we have these deeply held values and beliefs, and we have this kind of the sensitivity of the topic means that you can't navigate diversity, equity, and inclusion and try to create a more inclusive world without saying, hang on a second, this is just, it goes beyond being unfair. This is unreal that you've managed to get away with this, to do this to people like me over the years, over the decades, over the centuries. I'm saying no.
Yeah. You said something that just sparked conversations I've been having lately, but it's just like you kind of put the cherry on top, like the exclamation point of when you think of, power and who has historically had that power. There are folks with those same characteristics that are very pro DEI. And so as I'm thinking through, our topic today, it's the question I have for that group is, are you willing to push past that discomfort? Right? Because I believe that when you think of a majority of the minority, right, the majority of those that are marginalized, plus those with powers and positions of power, we can change the world.
Yeah.
But it's getting past that discomfort. And so the question I have is, as you're thinking about that discomfort, is rooted in fear.
Yes.
So what is the fear? Like when you boil it all down, what are some of the fears that are hindering this progress?
Yeah. So there is a fear of acknowledging privilege or unearned advantage. There's a fear, for example, if I acknowledge that the world and our society and organizations are biased, there's inequity in the system. If I acknowledge that, then I have to acknowledge that I might have benefited from that bias. That's really uncomfortable. And if I do acknowledge, then how complicit have I been? Because I haven't said anything. That's also uncomfortable. And also, how much then do I know my success in life has been due to this bias and inequity that have favored people like me? So that fear of acknowledging the unearned advantage, it can be really hard for people to face into. Because that's, I want to believe that my successes in life have been down to me and how amazing I am and the talented person and so to know that and I can't even measure it, but what if what they're saying is right? That means that I might have gone through life and I didn't get that job just because of who I am and what I brought to the role. So that's one. There's also a fear of change. That's just fundamental as human nature, right? Fear of change. Like if I do advocate for this and we are successful with all these DEI initiatives and programs, what does that mean for me? Because actually I've experienced a little bit of this now and I'm really uncomfortable sometimes in the room. I don't know whether I'm saying the right thing. I don't know, I don't feel free to speak anymore. And quite frankly, if that's what change is going to bring about, I don't think I want that. So there's a fear of change. There's a fear of complexity. And the complexity here is that we can't measure inequity. We can't measure how much more to give Nadia compared to Sacha.
Right.
Because Nadia is saying she's neurodiverse, and so therefore she can't do this, and this as part of the job as easily. But then Sacha's doing the same role as her. So now I'm adapting Nadia's role.
Mm-hmm.
But Sacha turning around and saying, well, how come her KPIs are different to mine now?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working like, and she's, what's she up to when I'm working, all these hours and doing this job, and seem to be compensating now for Nadia not being able to do the job that we're both supposed to be able to do and were recruited to do.
Right.
That's really tricky to navigate. There's a complexity there. Yeah. And we like simple as leaders. So there's a discomfort, that fear of complexity. That's the discomfort is playing out. It's like, well, hang on a second. I don't know how to measure this. And if I don't know how to measure it, how can I actually know whether I'm going to be if I'm doing the job that I need to do as a leader? And quite honestly, it's a right pain because I just need my people to do the job. And now what, so-and-so is telling me is that she can only do half of it. Well, that's not really good to me, especially with the resources we've got and the time pressures. Mm-hmm. And there's also this fear of sort of that unknown, like the fear of the unknown. And I mean, we could go on about all the fears. Yeah. So, but I'm just kind of giving this sense of, if I do treat people differently, your DEI is saying you need to see people's differences. You need to really, because you can't minimize people's experiences and treat them all the same. And yet leaders have been taught not to see difference in a way, because if you treat people the same, then you're going to steer way clear of that employment tribunal when Sacha turns around and says, well, hang on a second, you're favoring now, Nadia, and I'm being discriminated against. So if I treat Nadia and Sacha the same, then I avoid all of that. I don't see their difference, and they just need to do the job. I mean, look,
it runs counter. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. The other fear that comes up to mind as you were talking was the fear of losing positionality.
Yeah.
And it kind of ties back to the first one you spoke about, but it really is, if Nadia is now treated in a more fair and equitable way, then I'm going to lose out in some way or fashion, right? And so it's this, everybody wants a piece of the pie kind of thing, and I'm going to lose out if everyone's treated fair and equitably.
I know.
But what's counterintuitive to that is you're admitting at some level that you've received some type of there's an inequity in place.
Some lift up or
right. And so that's the what's the phrase, cognitive dissonance that takes place in this work. I don't want everyone to be treated the way that they need to be treated, because then I'm going to lose out. And I prefer it when everyone got the same thing and I benefited from that because it met my needs, and everyone else had to kind of figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, when you say it like that, I think most leaders would be like, oh, well, I didn't mean it that way. No, that's not what I mean.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. And, it's those aha moments that I think, people start to see, oh, I get it. Right. I often tell the story I've shared. I have 2 twin bonus boys. Twin boys, very different personalities. I can't treat them the same way because of those personalities.
Yeah.
Right. And anyone that has children, you love them all equally, but One might need something else. One might be very independent,
Yeah.
and the other might be stuck to your hip. You have to do what you have to do in order for them
Yeah.
to be successful. And so
Yeah.
some of that you might need to push a little harder, or others you might need to supervise a little bit more, or it's the same way in the workplace. People
Yeah.
need different things in order to be successful. And that's not to say you're coddling employees, but like when you were talking earlier, it's the work needs to be done. Yes. The what needs to be accomplished. The how is how I'm going to support you as a leader, right? The how may be you're a very independent person. I don't need to have a check-in with you every single day. Whereas this person over here may be neurodiverse, may have something else going on with them, and may need more frequent check-ins.
Yeah.
Are they both getting the work that needs to be
Exactly.
done? Right.
And
so I
that
think
sometimes is the struggle, is that actually, because fundamentally, let's just take neurodiversity as an example. The workplace has been designed by neurotypical people for neurotypical people.
Yeah.
Job descriptions, roles have been designed for neurotypical people. We haven't understood, the strengths. We haven't really leveraged the strengths of neurodiversity, because everything's been designed for neurotypical people. And so people like me have really benefited from that. I know that. I have very high executive functioning. I'm a neurotypical person. So if then, as a neurotypical manager leader, I'm managing this neurodivergent individual who I don't really understand or identify with personally, I don't understand their difficulty or struggle with a spreadsheet or with delivering to a deadline or whatever it is, I don't understand. And ultimately, I only have I've got 2 FTEs, two people on my payroll in my line, and I really do need those 2 people to be high performing and just get it done. And what I'm now experiencing is that this person really can't perform. So at what point do I start performance managing them because they're not meeting the expectations of the job role, which I recruited them to? And at what point is that inequity? Do we label that inequity and bias in the system that we've created the role for a neurotypical person, and now we need to adapt it to a neurodivergent individual? But that might mean the organizational goal or project goal or whatever it is needs to be adapted, needs to be shifted. And so that's complex stuff.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And, as you were speaking, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a good job, like for somebody, a consultancy to come in and be able to look at these very, neurotypical job descriptions and say, okay, this is what this person's strengths are. These are some of their challenges. How can we adapt this so that you still get the end results and end goal? Right. But it's created for them to be successful in that role. And so that's the equity piece of the DEI work that is often left out. It is how do we create these situations where we're removing barriers or providing support for people to be successful?
Because it's hard. That's probably the hardest part, is the equity part. A, because we can't always measure it that easily, and B, because it requires a fundamental, and I mean properly getting to the real kind of base foundations of the organization and re-looking at how we do things here, how jobs are designed, how the organizational structure works, how projects flow, looking at everything. And it requires agility from the organization's perspective and from the leadership perspective, because let's face it, people move on. So you might have a neurotypical person in a role and that job description suits them and they can deliver fine. Then the next person who comes along is a neurodivergent individual, and they might have specific challenges. Obviously they will. And so then you need to adapt. how do we make this work? How does, and then that person moves on, and then there's another person who comes in and they've got a disability of some kind, although, and so we adapt.
Yeah.
That agility is not built in to leadership, and it's not built into organizational systems at the moment.
And I will go as far as it's not part of supremacy culture.
Yeah.
Right? Supremacy culture is very much black and white. This is the way that it is. There's no agility that's a part of that. And so when you have organizations that are very rigid, that's part of that supremacy culture that is innate in how the work gets done. And so DEI runs counter to that.
Yeah,
DEI is, no, you have to be able to be flexible. You have to be able to be fluid. I don't know why, for some reason, I'm just picturing water.
Yeah. But it is that, right? And of course it's going to push back, because it feels like, so if you think about the traditional contract between organization and employee, the power has always been with the organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. So the cycle, that contract, employer-employee contract. Now, what organizations are feeling, again, this is another example of a system of power pushing back against change, is that it feels like to the organization, to the leaders, senior leaders, that now the pendulum has swung towards the employee. The employee is demanding and saying, well, hang on a second, this doesn't work for me. And actually, there's this, the organization doesn't like that. It's like, well, tough. You don't like it? Off you go then. Yeah. And we've seen that with hybrid working, and the likes of Elon Musk, and, just kind of going, well, no, you don't want to work here. This is the terms. You're in 40 hours a week. You then, fine. See you later. So that's the power. That's the system. That rigidity in the system, trying to claim back power from the employee again, feeling like the employee through COVID, through various kind of things that have happened over the last kind of 5 years in particular, has swung. And of course, Generation Z, and this, and their preferences and their demands, it's like the power in the system's kind of going, who do you think you are? Are you entitled Gen Zers?
Yep.
Yes.
It's
just, and there's the discomfort, there's fear, there's the power pushing back. That is what we're experiencing.
Yeah, it's this, we've always done it this way, and this is how it is. But when you think future forward, when you think of that generation that is now going to start taking over as older generations retire and move on, agility is now going to be a part of the DNA of organizations. And if we're looking at DEI, if we're looking at generational diversity in this post-pandemic workplace, exactly how you said, the power is now with the employees. And employees are now making those shifts of, you don't need to tell me I'm leaving, because I'm going to leave on my own accord, and I'm going to find something that fits what I need out of a workplace, versus me trying to fit into your box that you have over here. And so I honestly believe, and there was some research that was done that said Gen Z said 49% of them said that if their organizations do not change or become more agile, they will not be around in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And so this is that time now to get past that discomfort, to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. And really trying to figure out what it looks like to move forward in a much more equitable, agile way, because that is the future of this work.
Yeah. And it is. And I genuinely think that organizations, they have a lot of work to do, and they're pushing back against that work because it is so hard. And it is really just ripping them apart in terms of, there's so much, it's almost overwhelming how much work there is to do if we're really to create an equitable organizational system and an equitable society. And it's easier to push back against it than do the work itself. It's easier to stay comfortable. This is what we know. This is what works. It served us well, up to now. And to ignore. You have to. And I think that's where we come in as DEI practitioners, professionals, to support and guide that work, and to really, because you have to have empathy at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
With that discomfort. We can't go, well, it's hard, but you got to do it anyway. We don't want to be that sort of parent. Well, I'm sorry, you're just gonna, I know, you're just gonna have to do it anyway. Suck it up.
Yeah.
No one likes to be that sort of parent, and certainly every child will rebel against that sort of parent. So how can we demonstrate empathy for that discomfort that leaders are experiencing right now? Yeah. And I do think that care and consideration for how that is feeling to them, that experience of discomfort, the fears that we've just been speaking about, they're very real. And if you saw a child with all of those fears, you would do something different. You would put a hand around them. You would give them a hug. You would say, it's going to be okay. I'm going to help you. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's where, if we change tact, if we stop kind of trying to fight the good fight, which is still very relevant, but if we do it in a different way, through care, through empathy, through, going, do you know what? This is all going to serve all of us.
The greater good. Absolutely.
Right. And they might not buy into it right now, but I think we need to stop fighting the system in the way we've been fighting it.
Yeah, I agree. So Nadia, what are the things that you do to take care of you, to fill your cup?
So I have 2 girls, and so for sure filling my cup is days out with them, and really just kind of switching off, going for nice walks. We do a lot of walking as a family, and going out to sort of the countryside, and we love that. I have to say, connecting with other women, entrepreneurs, DEI practitioners, or just really cool, amazing, inspiring women, that definitely fills my cup. And I have had the pleasure of doing more of that recently, and it's just so uplifting. In general, to be with other people who are doing amazing things, but there's something special about women supporting women that gives me something extra. I love going to the theatre. I'm going to the theatre tonight. And yeah, just chatting, talking to people in like you, that fills me. That just, I don't do the work I do, and I think you don't either, to make a shed load of money, and it's all about the money. This is about a deep purpose that I have, right? This is about a purpose. I want to help create a world where people feel like it was designed for them.
Yeah.
And that purpose drives everything I do. And so when I'm doing this work, talking to people like you on my podcast show, whatever it is, keynoting or whatever it is I'm doing, actually, believe it or not, it's filling me. So I'm so lucky, because I get that from so many places in my life.
Beautiful. I love it. So if people wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yes. So I am on LinkedIn and I'm on Instagram. They're the 2 best social platforms that you can find me. You can also contact me through the Avenir website. And in the very near future, probably even next week, hopefully, the NadiaNagamootoo.com website will be live. And you can also contact me through that as well. My book website, which is beyond-discomfort.com, you can sign up to join the Beyond Discomfort community. And from September, I'm organising monthly 45-minute community calls where we're going to talk about discomfort. And I don't know what's going to come up in those conversations. It's just going to be whatever is going on at the time, just kind of bring stories, sharing,
Love it.
So there's lots of ways. I'm very accessible, and I love hearing from people who are interested in talking about inclusive leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion, or anything.
Wonderful. Nadia, thank you so much for being on the show today. I mean, my wheels are still turning. I've written notes and all kinds of stuff because it is this discomfort that we are feeling and that we are experiencing globally. I think is the discomfort that we need in order to push to this next iteration of what this work is and could be. And so in some ways, it's a bad thing, but I think in most ways it is what we need in order to get past this hump that we're facing.
Stuckness, I call it.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
stuckness. Yes. All
So
right.
thank you so very much for
Oh, it's been amazing. Thank you for having me.
absolutely. And thank you all for tuning into this week's episode. I hope you were able to gather some thoughts, get some ideas, of course, grab a few nuggets that you can think about today, tomorrow, share with others. As always, we want you to like, share, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, follow us wherever you listen to your podcast every Tuesday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern. And until next time, have a good one.